Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we are so excited and so lucky to have a guest with us today, Dr. Lisa Rice. Dr. Rice is an associate professor at the Graduate School of Education and Human Development at George Washington University. She is the co-creator and co-host of the podcast On Her Side. She also is a co-creator of a really amazing research video on autistic girls and friendship. She has recently published a meta-ethnography. I can't say it. Ethnography. There we go. It's a tough one on friendship in autistic girls. She has published over 15 research articles. She is an accomplished researcher and educator at GW, a robust agenda exploring inclusive education and supervision and supportive systems within the school system for children with differing abilities. And so we are so very lucky to have her on the podcast talking about autism and how it can show up and how she approaches her work as a special education and disability studies educator. So welcome, Dr. Rice.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you both. I love your podcast. So this is exciting for me.
I like yours. So it's really kind of fun. We're like there's been a couple podcasts coming out of G-Shed. So that's kind of fun. But so we were kind of talking off air about your approach and working with children within the school systems and how you teach.
Is, are we really worried about the kids? Are we worried about power and control and autonomy and, all those things that the adults are getting in the way? So yeah, it's sad, isn't it? It's like,
yes.
Whoa.
How have you handled those situations, like whether they be with your students or yourself? Like, how do you help them advocate? Like, I'm guessing like as a relational approach in the school, it can feel very different within a special education classroom. Like that's kind of, I kind of think about what we do as like counterintuitive or like revolutionary. Like we seem like these like crazy ideas of like having a relationship. But how have you like advocated for that? Like, how have you found that to be successful to or navigated that successfully?
Well, I don't know if I have.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of school university partnerships, and we can't really be partners with people who who think ABA is the only answer, and you know what? I can't let my philosophy always, force me to do certain things, because I do believe that different people respond differently to different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what makes us all so complicated. But for me, if I'm going to a buffet, and that's like thinking of all the things we can do to help behavior, my plate is about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can add lots of other things, but I just don't see us, being able to put on anything other than a plate. So sometimes that means that we agree to disagree. I had an OT come into a class that I was teaching a long time ago, and she was very concerned about all of the colors and the stimuli that were there. Mm-hmm. Understandably, for the student she was talking about. Mm-hmm. But then there were 3 other students who really needed that kind of classroom, right? So it is tough to do those dances, and I think that's why our work makes us so tired, because the natural response is not the right response, right? So you have to sort of put that aside in thinking about whose needs are being met, right? Is this about me, or is this about what the student needs? So anyway, that's sort of how we've been thinking about it, and a lot of reflection as a teacher about, am I giving this kid a hug because they need a hug, Or am I giving this kid a hug because I want to hug the kid?
But I think like that's like we talk about that a lot too, is like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because it's therapeutic for the child, or am I doing this because I feel like anxious or nervous? And um, it's tough. And I'm sure like I'm kind of curious. We kind of talked about this a little bit offline, but like from that relationship based perspective, I think a lot of times in schools, there can be a lot of like physical, not just physical restraint, but like also like expulsion from the room if you're, if you're disrupting. And there's all of these conversations about like, well, we have to protect all the other kids. And I'm kind of curious, like, how do you approach that from that your relational perspective of honoring that this child is having a really hard time right now, managing a whole classroom? Because we don't have that where we have to
Mhm.
necessarily like manage multiple kids at the same time. I'm kind of curious, how do you approach that?
Well, I think you can't be in a classroom down the hall that people are just like, okay, good luck.
Yeah.
And that's what tends to happen to a lot of kids with behavior problems. And a lot of times in special ed, you'll go into a room that used to be a closet, and oh, that's the special ed room. So it is definitely a great question on how you deal with that. And I do believe that administrators have to be involved, and they have to be finding the good things, going in for good things, and also helping a teacher. Teachers are getting assaulted at an extremely high rate right now because we've said, oh, keep all the kids in the class, which is important, but we need to make sure that kids are safe and that teachers are safe. So how do I deal with that? First of all, you have to have those rules, those routines, that relationship. You have to start with the positive, and you have to have those bones pretty well structured in a class. And you have to have procedures and how you do things. And then I do think you need some help. At schools that we've worked with have a sensory room, they have a corner, you can take a
Mhm.
break. There's restorative circles, right? Where how they solve peer relationships. But yeah, kicking a kid out, and then my really pet peeve is making them apologize before they come back, even when they don't feel that way. It's probably
Mhm.
not the way to go. I can
Well,
tell you
and
what not to do, but it's very,
Yeah.
very hard to do all the positive things. But I do think it's a team approach that has to happen.
well,
Yeah.
and I think the interesting thing about the apology component is how often do adults apologize to children when they've made a mistake? But we always require children to apologize for their mistakes. So if we never model it, why is someone who is still developing and learning these skills the only person who's supposed to be utilizing this skill?
Yeah.
I teach, and I've done some research on child teacher relationship training, which is teaching teachers some of the skills we use to build relationships in the classroom with students. It starts off individually and then it moves to more of like group formatting. So in small groups before you move it to like the whole classroom, where they can really practice skills of engaging in a more relational way. And it's one of the first, we call them pearls of wisdom that we teach. And it's that idea, it's not what you do, it's what you do after what you have done, which is just a real mouthful. But what
Mhm.
it's saying is that, right, like if we value relationships, repair is pertinent in relationships. And we make mistakes just like kids make mistakes. And if we're not willing to own up to our mistakes, we could see why kids have a harder time owning up to theirs because they don't see it modeled or shown to them along the way. Instead, adults dig in and then kids get in trouble for digging in for the same behavior. Yet that's what we've been modeling for so long. So if we do make mistakes, what is the problem in owning a mistake, right? I also think it's probably linked to Dweck's work about, grit and tenacity as well because it's those same concepts that are like linked throughout is that it's the reparative component. So it's the when things get hard, how do I overcome them? How do I tie back into and keep going, right? It's the same type of skill. And I'll be honest, our special ed teachers Here we call them EC, exceptional children. They actually had the hardest time with the skill set.
Hmm. Well, they've
And
been
it's
probably
because they
trained
utilize
differently.
more
And train.
behavioral techniques to alter. And so then you're like counteracting the behavioral component and like helping them see it's not an either or, it's an and. And when do we choose to use each approach, right? Like I'm not stating your approach is wrong. I'm just stating there's times and places for that, just like I'm stating there's times and places for this approach in this moment.
Right. Yeah.
Because kids respond more, they want to learn more if they have a stronger bond and relationship to teachers. And that literature is out there.
Yeah, it's so funny when we started, saying we're going to bring neuroscience into our doctoral program. And one of the first things, if you feel better, you learn more. And I was like, we've known that forever. Yes, of
Yeah.
course. But I am glad to know that it has somewhere in the brain we can now say
Yeah.
that. But yes, if and I think you're absolutely right. And to add to that, it's about control. That's really what you're
Mhm.
talking about. And one of my colleagues' favorite stories is we were supervising a teaching intern, and she got into a power struggle with one of the students. And she said, and that's recess. And that's another recess. And that's another recess. And then finally at the end, she's like, oh my God, what have I done? Right? You're caught in that what Nicholas Long calls the conflict cycle. And it's the adult response that decides whether it keeps going around and around or if you exit it. And it's hard to exit when you're locked in, but you have to.
It's so hard. And yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? Like, sometimes I'll like, it happens at home too, because I think there's this idea that like somehow we have to, like, children have to obey. And if they don't obey us, and they will not respect us. And if we don't, like, and it's like, then they'll never be. And I'm like, hold on a second. Like, do we have to take away Christmas? Like, where, and
When did
is
we get this far into it?
right. And why, help me understand why it's so important that they eat this sandwich, that we're gonna take away Christmas for it. Like, can we like just stop for a second?
Maggie,
But
I
it's
have a bunch of parents who take the doors off their kids' rooms.
Oh,
Yet they're so annoyed with their kids and they don't even want to be around them. And I was like, but you've created this now space where you guys can never be separated.
to
right.
Right?
be
As
fair,
like a punishment. And I'm like, how's that working? Or is
we
that
took
working for you?
we took the kids' door handles off, just the handles. Like, they have the door because they kept locking us out, and then kept getting locked in, and they couldn't get out because they were too little. Like, it was like really hard to do. And so we took them off, but now we lost them. And so we're just like, this was not helpful. Like, this was not, I mean, granted,
Sometimes our simple solutions in the moments aren't really long-term
No, right.
solutions we find later down the road.
they're not viable. And like, one of the best things, I think it's so nice having Christy in my life. I'm like frozen, but because it's like, you tend to want to teach kids like how to repair, how to do those things. And I was trying to teach my kids something, and Christy's like, don't you think that they can figure that out on their own? And I was like, yeah, they really can. And then they did. Um, and so it was nice. Okay, I'm like freezing everywhere. I'm gonna turn my camera off for a sec. But yeah, it's interesting to like see how kids can do those things on their own without us having to like come in, and how easy it is, even like when we know this stuff, to get caught in the cycle.
Mm,
But
so true.
yeah.
Well, Christy, what else do you see with sort of teachers and, autistic students and I use autistic students because so many people in the
That's what they want.
autism community
Mhm.
would prefer that language, but
Yeah.
for people with autism.
You've touched on a lot of stuff that I see. Like control tends to be a big, and like the power to win something over the power to connect is always baffling. To me, it's like to prove a point or do something, and my heart is always like, who won in that? Did either of you win in that scenario? And the loss of privileges and other things, which I try to remind people right? And this is going to come some of the neuroscience in, right? Like what is getting activated and if something is more of like a real low level part of the brain getting activated, so a real basic need, that is not going to be helpful for any student, but in particular for our autistic children. Their needs are different and we have to be mindful of what the undercurrent need is. And sometimes that need is separation or connection in the moment. And we have to decipher what are they actually seeking because sometimes their behavior may say one thing, but their desire is the opposite. And so how do we maneuver that, dynamic between the teacher and the student? And so, and then another thing I hear a lot is, the IEPs and the 504 plans and like having better, clear communication of what the need is. And then I think also from administration and like policy creation, a lot of the like pure behavioral approach to managing autistic children, or actually any student in the building that, like it all sums down to behavior. And if we better understand the underlying need of students, I think, which is a relational lens to do that, and kind of really helping teachers think about maybe our assumptions and how those align with how we're responding, we could correct a lot of that
Yeah, that's
in the
great.
classroom. And so,
I think
yeah,
that's
I think
awesome. I would love
that's a
for,
bit harder.
administrators too to, what's the unmet need of some of these teachers, right? I feel like we're not addressing that as well. If you're a first year teacher or a 30-year teacher, you're kind of treated the same way.
Mhm.
And, what are we doing to really like help teachers feel like a sense of efficacy and appreciate and being appreciated? So I would love to, I wonder if we meet those needs, if we would see less of what you're talking about. I
Yeah.
don't know, but I wonder.
Well, and that's one of the things, Christy, you found in that study too, is like the need for supports for teachers so that they could support the kids.
Hmm.
And it's hard. Like I even, working with a lot of the large school districts in the area, being like, because we give school counselors do internships and practicum. And I was like, we also have clinical mental health students. What if they came and
Mhm.
supported your teachers? Like,
Yeah.
We've
and
done that in the last year at the
did it
field
help?
placement that oh, the teachers love it. And we do a mix of both some teacher training and like the relational training and one-on-one emotional support. It's been interesting that things that have come out of that. I don't want to discuss it on here because we have not shared it with like administrators, like
Sure.
what has, because we weren't studying it. It was purely kind of
Mhm.
like a trial programming. And every time, every school year when I go back out there to see what services they want, it's the number one thing that the teachers want is they're like, is someone going to be here to support us too? And I was like, I can make that happen. Like that is a possibility. I just need to know. And it's nice because a lot of my play therapy students go out there. So if I can also give them teachers to support, they're also getting like learning how to support adults in the environment as well. And so it's the same skills, but it feels different because they're working on a different developmental trajectory.
Yeah.
But I think that's also in the CTRT training, Maggie. There's two ways to run it. The first model is you teach it all up front and then you just check in with the teachers every week. We ran it like their traditional CPRT model, which is child parent relationship training. And in that model, it's taught weekly. So it's taught in small tidbits. And so we ran it in the small tidbit format. And what we found is in week 4, you start to do small group supervision. And during that time, it really was not spent supervising, it was really emotional support with the teachers
Mm.
away from administration, where they could talk about what's really challenging them because they were really worried about what administration knew and didn't know and how that would impact their job, which I just can't imagine how hard that must be, especially if you're struggling or need support and feel like if you ask for support, it's actually going to hinder your progress as a teacher, potentially change your contract, look at, like, is there any advancement or do they look at you differently? And
Mm,
that has to be a horrible feeling
Mhm.
for teachers that they're being critiqued at that level.
right.
Like, isn't that so interesting? Like what you just said, and like where we started this conversation about autistic girls and how they feel like they have to mask and they can't share their true experiences because their fear of getting support. It's like how many people, like regardless of diagnosis, just need help and we don't know how to ask, like, or we don't feel like we can ask for it because it will be punished.
And teaching is a predominantly female profession,
Mhm.
right? I'm not saying there's not male teachers, and male teachers need the same support that females, but if we're gonna, like, is this a trait of female, like needs, or is this specific? I mean, I think
Yeah.
autistic girls need it at the same level, if not more, because they're managing things, in different ways. But it's also, gosh, professionally as females, how much do we need? How much do we lean into each other, Maggie, for support when something happens? To just talk through or have a second brain or
Yeah.
just to
And that
cry on the phone to each other?
that reminds me of the just sort of the social model of disability, right? Which
Mhm.
is, not that, we're all normal and you have something wrong with you and now we're going to fix you, but rather there are things in the environment that don't work for everybody. And why do we keep doing them? Right? Why do we have fluorescent lighting if it bothers so many people? Why do we still have bells in the why do
Mhm.
is fire are practicing fire drills which kind of upset a lot of kids, neurodiverse kids and typical kids, from that loud noise. Why are we doing it all that way, right? And I think that's one of the things I've learned the most recently in my work with a lot of autistic adults is there's things that we think are quote normal that really we just decided to do it that way. It really is not anything more normal about that way. And when get a little bit more flexible, I think we can design environments that work a little bit better.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
This was really interesting. I want to be mindful of your time. But I like thank you so much for coming. Did you have any other questions or things that we didn't get to that you want to get to before we go?
No, I could talk to you two all day though. I love
I
it.
was going to say the same thing. I was like, we
It's
need
so
to,
it's so fun. Maybe
it
like
also makes
Christy,
me think about a combined research study,
Oh, yes, I know.
but I was even thinking, Maggie, like, it'd be really interesting to do. We don't have any studies of just girls in play therapy,
no, we don't.
right? Like they're all like mixed or predominantly male. When we look at some of the data that we have, it would be interesting to have like an all female study and maybe Dr. Rice could help us think about some of the variables that we need to be thoughtful of, um,
Yeah. I
both
was
from
also,
a quant and qual like
yeah.
perspective.
Well, and even like when thinking about like the research that we do with CCPT, like are we involving autistic individuals within the development of that research study? And often we're not. And so like maybe that's something too, like that we really need to address of like how are we engaging within the community to make sure that we are being inclusive in ways that we think that we are, maybe supposing, but
Yeah,
yeah,
probably for all of our research in reality, right?
yeah,
Like, do we get other perspectives?
Mm,
Not to minimize, I don't want to sound like I'm minimizing, but like I think this is a good learning lesson that we can really take out of autistic research is like maybe we need to get more perspective on what's really important that we're studying instead of our curiosities leading why we study things.
yeah.
Or maybe we need to make sure what we're studying is really important to the population over, you know, needing to do something novel or unique in the field.
yeah. Well,
Well,
I'm really glad that you were able to come. Sorry, did I just cut you off,
Yeah.
Lisa?
no, no, thank you so much. You both so much. And yeah, anything you can think of, I will join you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yay.
Christy, the next time you're in town, let us
Oh,
know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'll
My
get
parents live in Northern Virginia, so I
Okay,
pop into
excellent.
town. We should go all get coffee and like plan a study.
That would
yeah.
be that would be
Oh, I
great.
would love
Yeah.
it. Well, thank
Yes.
you so much for being here. For everyone, if you have additional questions, reach out. You can call it or contact us at info@playtherapyspace.com, Maggie or Christy at playtherapyspace.com. So if you have questions for Lisa, let us know and we will pass those on. I see her quite often, about like every other week in a meeting. Um, and this would give us even more opportunity to work together. So thank you so much for giving us your time, Dr. Rice. We really appreciate it, and just learning about your research and what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks, guys.
you.
Okay. Yeah.